Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. So I have a question for everybody here today. Are you on autopilot? And I know that's just a phrase, a word, but are you operating on autopilot when it comes to your personal life, especially when it comes to your professional life, your business, a team that you might lead? Are you on autopilot? You don't want to be. And we're going to tell you why and some of the implications of all of this. And he is somebody, I'm not using the word autopilot for a reason, because he's got a dual role in his life in terms of how he helps others. Long history of piloting, teaches flying in many areas, has been doing that for decades, but also he's been doing this for quite some time now, and that is coaching for relevance, helping people move their lives forward. And he's been trained over the years. As so much neuroscience runs deep in his mind and how he helps us overcome being on autopilot. Organizational maneuverability is all part of it. Randy Swaim is back on the program. Hey, Randy, how you doing today?
Good. And as always, good to be with you. So, glad to be here today.
We've talked about your airline piloting connection to coaching, but it wasn't until today where I really saw it come very clear. As a lot of us are on autopilot. You can press the button on a plane and it's on autopilot. It's there when you need it. However, you're not going to achieve certain goals. If you're on autopilot, you might not be able to make maneuvers based on weather, direction, and things like that. You're just getting it done. You're getting where you need to go.
And in fact, if you think about that, are you aware of how being on autopilot is appropriate and how it's not, given your situation right now?
Something to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Something to think about. Yeah, and last time we got together, I learned how deep you run, even when it comes to the neuroscience involved in all of this. What's your training on that?
Oh, you name it. I've been good friends. In fact, I was on the NPN Hub podcast early this morning with my good friend, Dr. Justin Kennedy, JJ Kennedy, and he and I have been together. He's the founder of Institute for Organizational Neuroscience, and he and I have been friends for, I think, about 13 to 15 years now. I totally appreciate him, but I've learned a lot from him, and he's actually the one that certified me as a master level neuroplastician as well. So it's been very beneficial just with our relationship and friendship and all that. So that's what brought a lot of that to where, and one of the things I shared with him this morning, I'll just share this with you too, is it's amazing when I think back on my life long before I even mentioned him. I began to get an insight as to how the neuroscience had been playing in my life even before all of that came out, even though I wasn't aware of it at the time. And it's very insightful on that. So, with what you're saying, it's a key point a lot of times. Not everything is rote academic, in our world today. And that's very aligned with my organizational maneuverability concept. Not everything is rote academic, and I could give one picture from aviation if you want me to. But the other side of that is when you're talking about somebody going with autopilot because they're just shutting their brain off and going with what some academic thing said. At what point is that right? And at what point is it not right? And do people have clarity on when they've got to get the autopilot off, fly the airplane, understand and clarify it right, and do it right? And that's what a lot of people in today's world don't think about.
Wow. Do you feel that many people may think they're doing it right because they're doing what they always did, and they got by, there was no major issues. They're kind of just on autopilot. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you're just doing what you always did. To me, that's kind of like autopilot,
And you know what? There's a ton of people out there doing just that because that's what some of the schools that they went to are teaching. And there's it is so common out there. It is very key in what people are doing out there. But guess what? It's not always going to get you to the satisfactory and right answer. And that's the part that most people are not aware of.
Well, I bet you there's two things at play here on the autopilot concept. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's probably the mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting by. So let's just keep doing what we're doing. But on the flip side of that, after a while, if you're still doing what you always did, everything else is changing out here. And you might not even adapt to it just because maybe you don't want to take any chances, or you just don't want to look at it another way, or maybe you're just lazy.
That's right. And or to be very truthful and ethical with a lot of the people that may be listening, it's because they are not aware of how they need to do that different. You know, they've gotten comfortable and all that, but in their mind, that's what they're supposed to do. But you know what? They're not aware of how sometimes you need to do it differently. And do you have clarity on that? And do you have clarity on how you're going to do that? And when you're leading teams, guess what? As a leader, when you're trying to lead your teams, if you're trying to develop that in your teams, that can't be just at the point of attack when something happens. You have to kind of know how you can develop that in your teams as they're going through their journey, so that at a point where something happens, they make the right decision on the spot. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. That's something that leaders have to have absolute clarity on. No two ways about it.
I imagine you, when you're coaching somebody, that you give them a different view of, well, this is the way it could be, and this is where you may even prosper even more if you did it slightly differently, i.e. not being on autopilot, where the rest of it, we wouldn't even see that. You know, we're too far in the trenches.
Yeah, and one of the things, the way you do that is not by just telling them what to do, because when all you do is tell them such and such, then what you're doing is keeping them in the same thing, but just giving them something different to do. What I do when I'm working with pilots and jet pilots, and there's a lot of pilots that have lauded me in a positive way for what I do. But what I do with that a lot of times is that I ask them the challenging questions, and I give them a bit of time to kind of process it and think about it and come up with what they think might be the solution. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's not just you dictating to them, but a lot of times it's asking the right questions. And you know what? Sometimes if they look at that, go, boy, I hadn't thought about that before. What most people in today's world would do is look at them and say, well, here's what you need to do. No, a good leader looks at them and says, well, give some thought to that during the break and see what you come up with.
Empowering.
Yeah. And then you look at them. And in fact, I shared this on the show earlier. I think I mentioned this on the podcast here some time ago. But back when I was a leader at the Strategic Air Defense Training Contractor up at the Air Force Base in New York, I was it was kind of interesting because I was the leader of the detachment, the leader of the group, and they were coming up with some very good insights. And one of the guys, who was a young guy and was a co-pilot and stuff, he was going to sit down and write some notes that he gained out of something that the conversation went to. And when he sat down, and I don't know if you remember me saying this or not before, but when he sat down, all of a sudden he realized that the boss was in the room. And I was standing right there about 2.5 feet from him. And he went like this, and he started halfway to sit down, but then he went and he froze. And all he did is he looked up at me like this. And as soon as he looked up at me, you know what I did? I looked at him, I winked, and I nodded my head, and that's it. And he smiled, and he sat down on the chair and started jotting down some of the lessons that he'd learned out of kind of the conversations that we had and everything. And it's, you know, it's not when you're talking about developing your team to be able to perform in uh, you know, an organizational maneuverability concept where not everything is just rote academic and not everything just superficial and easy. You know, do they have the mental processing? And this is the processing, remember, in your brain when you understand neuroscience. The cerebellum back here in the back, that's where your habit patterns go. And that's where most people go. But guess what? The frontal lobe is where you get your true processing going on in your thinking, in your assessing, in your brain. And so ways that you can get your people doing that is what's going to really develop them to radical success that nobody else would even believe when something positive happened. And that's and guess what? As a leader, those are some things you got to be thinking about when you do that, because that is huge, and it's the core of neuroscience, but it's also how you going to be truly effective in an organizational maneuverability situation or event or whatever, kind of thing, when not everything just fits rote academic answers. And you can do that. Like, there's some times where you can put it on autopilot and that can help. There's some other times where you got to take it off autopilot. There's other times where you may need to just take it off and just sort of in your mind hand fly the airplane and know where you need to go and how you need to get there, kind of thing. And so all of that is just a key part of this, very aligned with some of what you brought and we're talking about.
Can we boil it down to some basics right now? We talk about this thing called neuroscience. How do you define that? Let's go, we've talked about it, but we've not jumped into the neuroscience water. And for somebody that has a slight understanding of it, can you give us more?
Yeah, I'll give you some more. The idea is neuroscience is really the science of how your brain actually works. And what you do on this is, most people that go to school or go to training, guess what? The instructor is just telling them what to do because they're just trying to make the students exactly like them. You know what? You're not developing their brain when you do that. You're basically instilling in them the tendency to shut their brain off and not pay attention to it. And that is the last thing that you want to do. And what I will say is on this, that when you interact with this, and I think you've heard me say this before, but when you talk about your brain, remember your brain releases neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that go to your body and make your body react based on what your brain just sent to it. And one of the neurotransmitters is a concept of norepinephrine. And norepinephrine is a concept that makes people either rise up and fight or run away and just throw it in the trash and not do anything with it. That's sort of the two aspects of norepinephrine. The other one basically is the dopamine, and you've heard me say that before, and that's pure arrogant. And if you're just teaching your people to be completely arrogant and just shut all of their thinking off because they're just trying to call attention to themselves superficially, that's not getting the job done either. The other one that I'll just throw out here, and there's a couple of other chemicals, but the other one is the oxytocin. And the oxytocin is an aspect of, remember, how people feel connected. And they feel like they're really part of a synergistic team, that they enjoy being connected with other people in the team. And guess what? How you're interacting with your people can do that very dysfunctionally or positively, depending on how you're doing it and what are you getting their brains to release into their body and to sense of it. And so you got to understand some of the nonverbal communication. You got to understand what your people are seeing and experiencing and how they're sort of showing that. Because guess what? If you're doing it in a norepinephrine way, guess what? 9 times out of 10, they're not really becoming part of the team when they do that in some cases. Now, if it's something where they want to go fight for the team, that's one thing. So it's not that you just got to shut that off, but understanding the why and all that. And when you're talking about neuroscience, you got to understand how your brain is thinking, how it's really bringing truth up and vision up and the picture up and the situation. And in your neuroscience, you have to be understanding that when you have certain factors coming on the scene, there's some people that'll just say, well, that's not what we came up with. So guess what? You may not want to do that because that could be bad news when it comes on scene. But how they are being aware of those factors, how their brain is interacting in such a way where they have clarity on the true success out of it rather than just trying to talk their way through it, kind of thing. And when you're talking about neuroscience, those are some key aspects about that. When you're talking about working and guess what? Like I say, a lot of this is very aligned with aviation because guess what? Aviation, as I've shared before, there have been a number of times, and there's been a number of times in my aviation career where the factors that came on the scene were not expected. And one of the things when I coach people and I talk to people, one of the questions I a lot of times throw out to them is I said, well, I'll tell you what, when you start down this road, what do you think are going to be the unexpected factors that might come on scene that make you go, oh, God, oh, my goodness. And what are you going to do? How are you going to recognize that? And what are you going to do when that happens and stuff like that? And so these are just all aspects of the neuroscience and being aware of it. And like you were kind of implying correctly, why you don't want to just put it on autopilot and just shut your brain off and sit back and blame it on the situation if it doesn't work out right. Because guess what? The situations can be very different and they can be very challenging. And if you're not aware of that, guess what? You can't make the right solutions and you can't get the right amazing results out of it. But you got to, in today's world, guess what? When you're leading a team and you're working for a company, or if you're flying an airplane, kind of thing, guess what? Those things are important. And as a leader, when you think about, and you know this, when you think about leader, one of the things the leader's supposed to do is model for the team. Well, guess what? This is one aspect where you're supposed to model for the team and make them want to connect with you and all this. And there's been I could give you one or two cases where I kind of did that over at the airport, and it was kind of amazing kind of thing. So and the reaction that I got from people that I work with was pretty amazing. So it just,
wow.
In fact, I'll just share this with you, golly gee whiz. But I was sitting there at a computer in kind of the operations area, kind of looking at some stuff schedule wise and all this. And I saw two people that obviously looked like clients came in, and they were sort of going, and I realized that they were probably here to meet somebody, but they didn't know where they were. And what I did is I looked at them and I said, well, can I help you guys? And I just walked over, and just being an instructor, kind of thing, I walked over, and they told me who they were looking for. And I said, yeah, okay, well, let's go find out. She was in sales. And I said, let's go find out. And I took them, and we found out where her office was. And her office, she was in the same office as one lady that knows me very well, kind of thing, in there. And what was amazing is I said, okay, well, here. And we walked into the office, and I introduced them to her. And she stood up, and I think worked with them for, I'm guessing, 10 or 15 minutes or something like that. And while I was in the ops area, I noticed them coming out, and they walked up to me and shook my hand with a huge smile on their face and thanked me for helping out. And I said, okay, cool. And so when they walked out, I walked back to that office, and I kind of went in and just said something to her. I said, thank you, glad. I appreciate their reaction. You obviously did some good work for them and everything. And the lady that knew me well looked at me. She said, I shook both of their hands. And the lady that knew me very well, I was blown away because she looked at me and she said, well, I'll tell you what, Randy, with your smiles and how you interact and stuff, wow. And she looked at me, she said, one thing I'll say, and I said, what's that? And she said, we need to get 15 more instructors just like you. I went, oh, really? Kind of thing. And that's not bad mouthing any instructors, so don't take that. It's not. I'm glad with where I work and who I work for and all that kind of stuff. So it's not anything negative.
Yeah. It's like when you find something that works, let's say there's a ton of different car models out there, but you find one that works for you, you stay, you want it, you stay with it, and you feel good about it. Question about neuroscience.
Okay.
Is it impactful when those situations come up where, things are good and all of a sudden, wait a minute, what just happened there? And you have to react, and you're in a situation, you have to make some decisions pretty fast. Things just happen. Mm-hmm. Does that help you pilot through those challenging times when you've kind of mastered the neuroscience?
And when you are aware of it, yes. Because if you find yourself, like with anything, and in fact, I shared earlier today one situation where I had to kind of prevent a fight in a parking lot kind of thing with several people, and how I did it was amazing. But the amazing thing about it is when you're looking at neuroscience and you have understanding of it, are you aware of how your brain is releasing those chemicals right now? And what do you need to do differently? How do you need to overcome that and react differently in a successful and positive way? Because you know what? If you feel the norepinephrine coming in where you're wanting to stand up and, that kind of thing and everything, guess what? How are you going to reduce that so that you can take control, you can catch the vision, and you can act in a successful way that gets you to where you're going? And guess what? You do that, and the people that are with you probably sense that oxytocin kind of thing, where it's a degree of oneness in the team and everything. And so all of that. So I will say this, that the awareness of neuroscience, when you're talking about really being a leader, or if you're talking about the fact that you're working for a team and you're wanting to become a leader and become a senior manager or whatever and really get involved in this, guess what? Neuroscience is a key aspect. You have to be an absolute scientist on it? No. I'm a certified maximum neuroplastician kind of thing. But do you have to be at that level? No, you don't have to. But you know what? If you understand what that's doing inside of you, and you understand how you need to react and tweak and accomplish, that can be huge. But you know what? I believe awareness of those neurotransmitters can be huge in that.
I believe you've helped us understand that neuroscience is there's a lot of science going on there, but the takeaway for me is that it's being in touch with oneself, understanding oneself, how you react, like you said, the chemical reactions within your brain, so that you're not on autopilot.
Yep. And how are you engendering that in the people you work with?
Yes. Very cool.
Yeah. So that is key. And understanding how you need to do things differently so that you engender the real positive stuff within you and also within the people that you interact with. And that is huge. And neuroscience is a key aspect of that. No two ways about it.
You've got a powerful arsenal to help people, going from science to coaching methodology and so much more. Start a conversation with Randy. If you're looking to elevate, you have a business, you want to make some changes, coachingforrelevance.com is the website. No sales pitch, nothing going on there. It's conversation. Learn a little something, and then maybe learn a lot of something and change your life. Randy, thank you so much for being here today and breaking this all down. Very clear and very powerful, and just I love the way the mind works. It excites me, and I've got a better understanding thanks to you today.
Sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what, it's an honor to be on with you, Steve, and we'll look forward to being on again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Let's go inside the mind of a 10-year-old.
I should have worn those earrings today.
I like those earrings. Gabby has those awesome earrings. I need to ask her where she got those, but that's just what she would want me to do. I'll have Michaela ask her for me.
Buckle up, Sarah.
Yeah, but then Michaela will be like, why don't you just ask her yourself? That's just like Michaela.
Sarah, buckle up.
Michaela's such a great name. I wish I was called Michaela. There's like a dozen Sarahs in my class.
Hey, we're not hitting the road until you buckle up, honey.
Oh yeah, seatbelt. I forget sometimes because my brain is like busy, you know? I wonder if there's pizza at school today.
Sometimes it can be tough to get through to your kids, but it's not impossible. Always make sure they're wearing their seatbelts, even on short drives. Remember, you have the keys, you have the power. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup for more information.